In this lecture, I'm going to show you how I would take on doing a simple geologic mapping exercise for planetary geology. So the goal of mapping is to be able to eventually make observations and create kind of a picture of an area of the planet, but where that surface is grouped or colored by unit. And when I say unit, I mean a section of rock or a type of rock that shares physical properties like the mineralogy or the color, the texture, but it also might share um, the genetic properties. So what kinds of process um, caused that unit to be formed. So what I mean by that is that if you had glacial ice and ground ice, that was, in the subsurface exposed on a cliff face. If you've got glacial ice on the surface and ground ice exposed in a cliff face, even though those are both ice, you're not going to map them as the same unit because the process that produced them is different. The glacial ice is maybe being condensed and moving downhill and gathering up, and that's how you get it into the picture where you have the glacial ice, and the ground ice maybe comes from really, really old water freezing or really old surface processes, where then over time you've covered that up with more rock. So the way that I do this is I look at all of the available products, all the available imagery, compositional data, topography. If I've got color imagery, I'll pull that. And then I group the pixels based on specific properties. And I do that by labeling things in the picture and really bringing my attention to all the detail that's in the picture. And then I go ahead and group the units and draw the contacts. So let's go ahead and make some observations of this surface. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw arrows to things that I see in the picture. And doing this is going to prevent you from jumping to conclusions about what your units are defined as. So for example, in here, I'm going to label this as dark, smooth, low-lying. It's kind of long. I don't want to call it a channel because the channel kind of implies how it forms, but we'll say like linear because it is kind of in a line. Linear depression. Right here we've got some light speckled materials. And you can kind of see that those maybe only lie in the middle of that linear depression. This stuff looks a bit feathery. When I say feathery, I mean it kind of has that ombre, or it goes from really dense looking light stuff to less dense. So I'm going to say light feathery materials. I've got impact craters with light rims. And I've got them in different sizes. So I'm going to say small craters. But fundamentally, even though they're on a different scale, they kind of look the same as these craters. They've got light rims. Even over here, light rims. I've got cliff faces. Got these kind of weird ridged valleys. So I'm going to call this a ridge or small cliff. And then I'm going to point this out too. We've got, gosh, what should we call those? you don't want to call, I mean, they are dunes, but you don't want to call them dunes when you're labeling them because you're trying to make observations and not interpretations off the back or off the bat. So they're kind of oriented like this. So linear, light, higher topography landforms. I abbreviated topography TOP. Okay, so I've kind of labeled some pictures through here. Then what I like to do is use those labels to think about what distinct regions or what distinct units of the surface there are. Here, if I imagine making a box right here, for example, the unit in that box is going to be that dark, smooth material. So if I'm going to characterize that unit as being dark, smooth material, I can't put this area in that box. I can't map this as that same unit. So I'm going to make a box right here. My box of my light feathery material. And for that matter, these are both light materials, but this one is feathery and this is pebbly or speckled. I'm going to map that as its own unit. Impact craters. Impact craters could be their own unit, but if you think about it, they're part of these, whatever this unit is. They're actually a diagnostic feature of being in that unit because there aren't impact craters in the darker low-lying areas. So I'm going to make this light high topography plateau unit its own unit. And I feel like I'm going to have to separate this out from that because this area doesn't have dunes, but this does. And so maybe being high topography with dunes is different. And then the cliff faces. The cliff faces are their own unit because they're not technically high topography. They don't fall in that category. They're light, but not cratered, so they're not going to fall in with the dark material. I'm going to make that cliff face its own unit. So these boxes are what we would call type localities for each of those units. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start writing the descriptions of each of these units. If you turn to the back of your packet, you should have grouped the terrain. So you are grouping the terrain, you're using those blocks that you made before, and you're going to discuss what the physical characteristics are in each of those units. Now, we're going to name the units a descriptive name. We're not going to call them unit A, B, C. You actually have to give them a name. So I'm going to call one unit the dark, smooth, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a diagnostic name. I'm going to call it a dark, smooth valley. That's going to be a unit name. And I think adjacent to that, we'll say the light, rough highlands. We could have called them plateau, but I'll call it highlands because we don't really know. Actually, I like plateau better. Let's call them a light, rough plateau. We've got, and we have two kind of subunits with that. We have the cratered and we have the dune covered. So we're going to divide light rough plateau unit into two subunits. And because there are impact craters even in the duned area, so this dune area we're just going to say is a subunit. We have this material, so we're going to call this the light speckled valley fill. And then we'll call our other unit that is that kind of feathery unit light smooth debris, because it's kind of, debris just means little pieces, so it's kind of like feathering off the edge is like a debris. And then our cliff face. So let's call that cliff face just cliff face units. All right, now we can describe each one. So the dark smooth valleys are dark and they're smooth. Don't feel dumb about writing that. Dark, smooth, linear, low-lying valleys with cliff walls and superposing light material. Superposing just means it's laying on top. After you've written your description, then you can start adding in like maybe one sentence about your interpretation of what that unit might be or what it might represent. So it's long, it's valid, it's low. You might think it could be a river channel. You could think it's a graben. It could be a glacial valley. We don't know unless we get more data. So we can say interpreted to be a river valley or graben. A graben just means a valley bounded by normal faults. And we'll talk about faults later. They're tectonic features. Light rough highlands. The cratered units, we're going to describe these as light, high topography, linear plateaus with superposing craters, and this one is going to be, and ideally you would write this out, same as the cratered, light rough plateaus, but with light linear superposing dunes. So we'll do one more of these subfeatures and then we'll end the video here for now. Let's try the light speckled valley fill. So that's this unit. It looks like it's little pieces. It looks like there might also be some hills and organization in here. So we're going to say light, rough materials, somewhat organized, into hills, running the middle length of the dark smooth valleys. And then we might go ahead and interpret what they would be. So if you think that this is a river channel, those might be outwash that's left behind after the river's gone. For example, interpreted to be, I'm just going to say collected debris materials. Okay, so you're coming through here. Now we're going to add the first value to data types used. For this particular description, all we've used so far is the monochromatic imagery, so the black and white imagery. So you're just going to write monochromatic or black and white imagery. And you'd write that for each of these. In the next video, what we'll do is go through and we'll try to add what we would add from different data types. Thanks.